people like people that are real and authentic. They don't like superheroes. Yeah. So it's really interesting to me that these successful people like Tim and whoever, they all are just real people. And the ones that don't seem the cream that doesn't rise to the top, the ones that don't tend to be ones that are caught up in themselves and are trying to be really cool all the time. People don't relate to that, just like Superman. They had to make him, they had to give him the kryptonite, you know, they had to give him that authenticity. So, yeah, but Tim, yeah, and he's just a drop dead good looking guy. He's cool as he can be. He's so good looking and cool that you're around him and you can't hardly look him in the eyes. He just,
He does like look over his head.
He's such a cool
look
guy.
directly at it.
He's so cool. He's
I
just
can't
a cool
imagine.
guy.
Hello and welcome everyone to this week's episode of the Framework Podcast. I'm one of your two hosts for today's episode, Jamie, joined by Anna.
Hey, Jamie. How's it going?
It's going great. You know, we're out here at Excel, which we've done a couple years now with the recordings out here. We're in the amazing community hub, and we've got one of the fantastic speakers, presenters, songwriters, the incomparable Jimmy Yeary here with us today. I got to kind of introduce him and, then just watch an amazing performance. So, Jimmy, we're super excited to have you out here at the conference, in this community, and also on the show with us today.
Well, Jamie and Anna, thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
Yeah. Well, everyone can't always see you, but you have your guitar up here, and you perform some amazing songs and stories on stage. And, you know, one of the questions we always like to start with is a little bit of your story. It's because we're a financial service-based company, we put the money twist on it too, which is, do you have a first money memory that comes to your mind?
A first money memory. You know, my dad was always like, I always feel like I'm boring people, and my insecurities run deep because Dad was always like, just get out of the house. Just get out of the house. Go outside. Pull weeds. So he'd have me go out and pull weeds. We didn't have a weed eater, and I was it. And so I would during the late 70s there, I would be outside pulling weeds. A neighbor saw me pulling weeds like crazy and asked me to come over and pull her weeds. And she didn't have a weed eater either. And so said she would pay me. So so I went over and I pulled weeds one day, and she gave me money, which I'd never held before at the age of 8. And so my first money experience, it was some sweet old lady next door that gave me money to do the same thing I was doing at home for free. So, yeah.
There's a lot of lessons wrapped up in that one, right?
Many, absolutely. I could talk for a long time about that. Yeah.
What did you buy with that money?
You know, it's amazing that you're asking that, because I literally, one of the main reasons I could be a songwriter is because of what I bought with that money. Yeah. So my grandfather always had a yard sale every Saturday, and I always wanted to buy something. I'd never made money and bought something. So I decided I was going to go to his yard sale. I was going to buy something. But the problem is he was known countywide as someone who never went down on his prices, and you had to negotiate. Okay. Nobody was ever there and never bought anything because they knew he wasn't going to come down. Everything was overpriced, and everything was just junk. But I took that money, that $2.50, and I went over there and bought, he had a bunch of cassette tapes, and they were all just worth, nothing, because they were just old and raggedy and broken cases. And I tried to talk him down, and I got him to $2.25 for a tape that was probably worth, 20 cents. And it was and I didn't even care what it was. I just took it home and I put it in a tape player, and I thought, this is my tape. I bought this, it's mine, and I don't know who it is, but I'm going to listen to one song. And I ended up listening to the whole tape over and over and over and over, and it was Billy Joel. Oh. And it was the broken glass, that one, whatever that was called. But him on the front where he's got the broken glass in the background, and so many unbelievable songs. I thought, my gosh, this is, all music is this good. And it turns out it's not. So, but I just decided I want to create this. And at 8 years old, it was, as crazy as it sounds, I just, in a crazy way, I'm like, I want to do this, and I don't know why I want to do this, but Dad, I got to have a guitar. And it really started everything, all because a sweet old lady saw me pulling weeds outside.
I love how you weaved all that together.
No, it's just incredible.
It's amazing.
Well, Anna, what was your first, I know you said it, but what was your first album or thing you bought?
Oh my gosh.
Do you remember?
I don't even remember.
Okay.
Probably like Tiffany. I was really into the pop singers when I was a little girl, like Tiffany and Debbie, like all the one-namers, you know?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah,
those are my jams.
Yeah, I bought Dire Straits' Money for Nothing on a boardwalk. where it was sitting outside, and I had never heard them before, and my uncle was with me, and he was like, you'd really like this, because I knew like the Beatles and a couple places, but I had never heard them before. And that one really changed my view on like music, because like I felt the same way. I was like, wow, there's all these bands like Dire Straits you've never heard of, and then there weren't as many as I thought there were gonna be.
Yes.
Yeah.
That's just a special album, though. Like, I remember that was the first music video I ever saw, was Money for Nothing. My dad had bought a VHS tape, and I remember watching. I was like, wow, this is like not only was the music great, but like all the colors and everything was wonderful.
Absolutely.
Yeah, the neon lights in that probably match the neon lights of downtown Nashville.
Absolutely,
So
and our backdrop here, if you're tuning in on YouTube. So Jimmy, you've said before that you used to like to sing in the bathroom as a young person, and kind of so talk to us about that journey and how you came to be the songwriter you are today.
Yeah, my story is my wife always says, she said, I don't understand how you see your past so vividly, but I really do. It's like I was there was some my dad wasn't the most kind man in the world at times, and so there was a level of hardness there that would cause me at some point. It caused me to want to retreat away and sort of. It's like I wasn't allowed to. Let's just say I wasn't allowed to cry in front of my dad. He didn't think that was really cool. And so I remember one time him really being hard on me about a situation, and it caused me to be very emotional. And he almost made, not unlike maybe like an 8th grade school bully, he was like making fun of me, honestly. And so I decided I'm not going to do this anymore. I'm just going to go, if I'm going to cry or be sad or be emotional, I'm going to go do it by myself away from Daddy. So I started retreating to the bathroom on the toilet seat down, just because of the acoustics in the bathroom are amazing. And I would write these songs, and I could be anything in a song that I wanted to be. I could, I wasn't a good-looking kid. My head was the same size then as it is now, but I could get a girl in the songs that I was writing. And so it was just amazing to me that if I felt something, other people seemed to feel it. And like I would sing these songs for Daddy's friends or Mommy's friends, and everybody was just like, I could see that if I didn't feel something, they didn't, but if I did, they did. And that really intrigued me, that connection that could be made from vulnerability and feeling something.
I love that. And that's what you talked to us this morning at Excel about, is that, using storytelling to create that connection that kind of serves our need to not be alone. Like, we don't want to be alone, right?
Right.
So talk to us a little bit more about, that we were able to go to your session and hear the song that we all wrote together and all of the things. But for our listeners who aren't able to do that, what are some of the things you want them to hear about what you said to our audience?
Yeah, I've always got this foundationally. I just want people to understand that there's more. They need more than just permission to be vulnerable. It's a necessity. We all, we live in a world where you take the prettiest picture and you talk about the most organized and put together life that you can imagine, and that's really what we show each other. But we're the most disconnected, possibly, in a lot of ways, in a lot of respects, than we ever have been. It's one of the greatest things that you two could do for me, is that for me to find out that you're human and that you don't have it together and that you do mess up and you do feel less than perfect and less than happy, and maybe some people intimidate you, and maybe you just all the stuff that life brings about that we tend to try to hide from one another. I'm forced to put those in songs, because if I don't, then I don't feel them, and then if I don't feel them, nobody wants to record them, because true artists want to record authentic songs that are honest. And so I'm forced, because of that, to be real and to be honest. So again, just helping people understand, hey, anxiety is not a bad thing. Stepping into your uncomfortable zone is not a bad thing. It exposes the most authentic you that you'll be at any other time, and therefore makes you more valuable to me, because I can't relate to superheroes. And I just want them to understand that. And in the business world, in and out of the business world, that's a lot of what's missing. People a lot of times don't realize maybe that if it's just that real authentic human aspect of business, if you will, that is one component that could exponentially grow a company.
For sure.
Well, Well, have you heard this story of like Superman when it got pitched to all the? Did you know that one?
No, I don't.
Okay, so but it's almost exactly what you said. So Superman, they drew up this comic character, superhero, right? And they went and pitched him to all these different places. And the reality was they got turned down like 75 times because every time the feedback was, we cannot relate to this character because he's essentially an immortal god here on the planet, right?
Yes.
And they didn't have flaws with him. They couldn't relate to him. So they had to build in kryptonite to create a flaw in him so people could start relating to him. And then they eventually got that one accepted. But it's one of those things that when he had no flaws, nobody would relate and they wouldn't publish it. And it was like,
isn't that something?
Yeah.
Wow, that's interesting. Yes, that's
I didn't know that
incredible.
either.
Yeah.
I learned something new on framework.
I'm going to
every
put that in my
episode.
talk. I've got to.
Definitely.
No, but that's amazing. Yeah.
No, I love stories like that, and it's just words trigger it, and like you were saying, and I was like, oh my gosh, there's a perfect story that fits that one.
Yes.
Because it was neat how you wrote a song for everybody and went around and asked all these questions, but only after you had told us all personal stories about yourself. And you made that point, like, hey, you wouldn't have wanted to open up to me and answered all of these questions about your childhood bullies or your mom, your dad, if I hadn't told you. Tell us more about that.
Yeah, well, it means a lot that you understood that and that was conveyed well enough for you to get that, because that's really what I want them to realize is, had I come out on stage and go, hey, tell me a story about your daddy. Hey, tell me about your kids and what's one of the greatest things that you do consistently to try to make them happier. Tell me about your bully. Tell me about your life. Tell me about your mistakes. People are going to be like, hey, leave me alone. Stop. They're just going to be shut off from me. But when I can come out and show them that I'm a little messed up, that sometimes I feel like the most uncool person in the room, that it's suddenly they go, well, wait a minute. I'm staring at a human here. This, I don't need to act cool. I mean, this guy's obviously not incredibly cool. He's imperfect as they come. So,
but he's friends with Tim McGraw.
Yeah, but he knows Tim McGraw.
Yeah,
but that's a good point too. A lot of times sometimes the person with the most value and the most opportunity to create change and affect change in people around them is the person that people look at as someone who's accomplished something special, right? When you see somebody like that and then they're vulnerable, then it really makes you go, well, dadgummit, they've done that and they've accomplished that. Well, maybe I can accomplish that. They're kind of broken and they succeeded. Yeah. I'm kind of broken. I can succeed. That's really a gift. But if a leader is constantly, I'm perfect, well, then people around him are going, well, I'm not perfect. And there's a disconnect there. So hope I didn't go off topic.
No, that's great.
And we were at, Anna and I went to an event in Denver a couple weeks ago, and it's like the next generation event from the Financial Planning Association. There's all these young advisors looking for their future. And what's really interesting is so many of them, and it was a big topic while we were there, was this imposter syndrome, and they all feel it. And they all look at some of the successful people as if they're perfect and that they don't make mistakes, and they entered their career day one, then were successful day three, right? And day two was a little rough, but outside of that, the rest of it was good.
Yes.
And one of the things that I love the way you've put it, but it's trying to instill to people that like all these successful people are messed up too. They all have issues. They all have challenges. They're not perfect. A lot of them, CEOs of companies still question themselves every day.
Absolutely.
And so I love the way that you frame that. And then I'll shift over to kind of the next point, which is you have this great storytelling power and, ability around you. But you also talk about like taking it from saying something to feeling something, which I think is really, really interesting. So I'd love to hear a little bit on that.
Yeah, again, I try to impress on people the importance, the significance of telling your story, why your story specifically matters. I tell people I can take any life in that room. I can take anybody and write hit songs. I feel like for the rest of my life, I would just tell their story, but nobody can tell their story. Nobody can tell your story like you can. Nobody can tell my story like I can. But here's the thing that people have to remember is that if I tell you my story, you see your story, because we have different stories, but we have the same emotions. It's that simple. We all have the same emotions. You have felt anger, sadness, depression, anxiety, happiness, joy, contentment, resentment. You've felt it all. Yeah. Well, if I tell you my story, I have to feel it to tell it. If I tell you, if I don't tell my story, I'm faking it. I'm not feeling it. So if I can just tell my story, I feel it. Well, it's a principle, an unwavering principle. If I feel something, you feel it. So if I just tell my story, so you say how to say it or feel it, I could tell you I love my dad, or I could tell you I love the man that taught me how to fish. We talked about that a little bit today, right? That's my story. One I say, but when I tell you I love the man that taught me how to fish, I could about cry because I see a pond, I see wisdom, I see calluses on his hands, I see a worm, I see a hook, I see sun, heat, I see wisdom. I say, I miss my daddy. When I said today that I could tell you I have kids, or I could tell you that if I step on another 2 a.m. Lego, I'm choking out one of my boys, right? That's my life. But I can tell you that, and you see yours, right? Because you have felt frustration. You have felt like, dadgummit, pick it up. Why is it still there? For me to step on when I just want a little bit of milk. It's just being authentic forces you, telling your story forces you to feel it. And if you feel it, everybody else feels it. And a connection happens whether you realize it or not. The intrinsic need not to feel alone is met. And there's a friendship that happens. And ultimately, friends want to associate with friends. Friends want to work with friends. Friends want to hang out with friends. Friends want to do business. Friends will listen to your goofy ideas. And friends can tell you you're wrong. And as a friend, you're not going to get all offended. Yeah. You can do life together. You can do business together. But it really starts foundationally at being authentic and vulnerable with your story.
And I love how the story you told about the ticket agent. Tell us that story again. How that, like, you were vulnerable with her. You shared something and it kind of disarmed her and created a connection. Yeah. So I won't steal your thunder. I'm going to let you tell because I love that.
I tell people that my main objective with telling my story ultimately is because it just makes me happier. It really does. Neuroscience proves that your dopamine levels go up. When you tell your story, you feel good. You go from such a place of authenticity. It feels good, and people around you see their story, and they feel better. So ultimately, but you can't get around the fact that it connects with people, and people do favors for you if they like you and they trust you, and that's really what you're doing. You're building trust. But long story short, I was missing my boys. I was in Martha's Vineyard. I wanted to get home. I got to the airport. No flights were going out. And everybody was frustrated. I get in line. I make my way up to the counter. And my story of the day, and I often tell people, find out what that story of the day is. What's going on in your life right now? Because that could be the most valuable thing you have to connect with other people. My story of the day was I was missing my freaking boys. I couldn't wait to see them. And we have this extra thick carpet we put in a sunroom that I told her we didn't have money to make, but to put up right now. But anyway, I couldn't wait to get in there and roll around on that carpet with my boys. And that was my story of the day. I make my way up to this frustrated woman behind the ticket counter who doesn't even look me up in the eyes and just says, "What's your name? Where you headed?" I said, "Jimmy Yeary, Nashville, Tennessee." And then I practiced what I preach. And I just was like, in the middle of all that kind of chaos, I said, I can't wait to get home and roll around on the carpet with my boys. I sure do miss them. And again, she looked up at me as if to say, "Why are you talking to me?" But then she says, "How old are they?" And I went, 5 and 1. Then she said, "I got grandboys. They're 6 and 2. Aren't they amazing?" And then we just have this banter back and forth. And suddenly she's just like, "Well, there's no flights going out and good luck." And she's suddenly my friend. And she didn't even care that I was living a few seconds earlier. I go sit down. There's a flight leaving, a line forming, and she comes around the counter and comes up to me, says, "Hey, come up here." I come up, and she gives me a ticket. And she said, "There's a break in the fog. They're going to get a flight out of here. They said there's an empty seat." And I told them, I know the guy. And she comes and gets me, who she doesn't even know, but she does actually now, because of my story. And she gives me favor, and she wants to do life with me. She wants to do business with me. She wants to help me. And that's really what it's about, It's a win-win-win. It just makes you feel better. It connects you with people. People do favors for people. It's just everybody. She was happier. She was able to help somebody. She helped me. I was home at 7:30 that evening inside of that sunroom we couldn't afford, rolling around on the carpet with my boys, because my story matters. And if I tell it, you see your story, and it creates a connection.
Yeah, I love that. And it did, I sometimes could be a curmudgeon, as Jamie knows. And when people share with me like that, it disarms me a lot. And I noticed that happening. And when you told that story, I was like, oh, I've experienced that, but from the ladies. I was the lady.
You see your story, yes.
I saw my story and I love it.
Wow. Well, I'll share on this. There's a lot of episodes where sometimes she's like, "I don't know, I really want to do this one." And then I'm like, "You're going to love them." Then the person comes on and shares their story. And she's like, "They were the best person ever." That was my favorite episode. I loved everything because people
Every
come on.
episode's my favorite episode.
Yeah. Because people, we have this awesome opportunity in life where we just get to ask people their stories.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
it's so fun. And you leave connected to people on every one of these, and we feel closer to them, and we follow up
Absolutely.
with them later. And it's really a amazing, gift. And there was so I'm gonna I like tying other thoughts that come into my head into these. So I don't remember his name, which I feel bad about, but I saw a speaker one time at a legal CE thing, and what he did was a similar style thing that you do, but for the legal world. He actually writes people's opening arguments for them, and he takes them from attorneys are very notorious for just telling you facts, right? There's no emotion, there's no story, it's just facts. And he told this story, which was like, you don't open and be like, oh, this guy is an alcoholic, he's a bad person, blah, blah, blah. He's like, you tell the story that like, well, every day John gets off of work and goes to the bar. They know his name there. His drink's ready.
Yeah.
His next drink comes 5 minutes later. The next one comes 5 minutes after that.
Right.
Like everybody knows him there because he's there every day.
Right.
And like you then don't even have to say the next part. Everybody now knows that story, and you've then already decided. And he's like, and then that connection in your brain, you can't convince them otherwise because you've made up your mind on what that story is. You've developed that connection to it.
Right.
And I remember that stuck out to me so much because I know so many people that's how they present. They come in and give you a bunch of facts and there's no story around it. And you're like, well, then I decide what happens, not, you don't create a connection to it. So I think what you do is so wonderful in the way that you tell those stories. So there is that connection and we connect with others on it.
Yeah, like in a song, the I Drive Your Truck, that Lee Brice had that I wrote with Connie Harrington and Jesse Alexander. Well, the first lines of the song, which, I love the ambiguity of it, but the 89 cents in the ashtray, a half-empty bottle of Gatorade rolling on the floorboard, and that Dirty Braves cap on the dash, dog tags hanging from the rear view, old Skull Cannon cowboy boots, and a Go Army shirt folded in the back. What the heck are you talking about? Yeah. All I know is that everybody listening is in the movie. Mm-hmm. So, and that only comes with making the story your story. People oftentimes as songwriters, as storytellers, want to know where all the ingredients come from for these songs and stories and stuff. And it just comes from authenticity. So I make, like, I imagine driving my dad's old truck. I imagine riding on Pleasant Road, the road I talked about in front of the house I grew up in. I imagine losing my brother and him dying. He's alive and well, but I imagine him dying. You just, again, those, and he's exactly right with the opening statements that you were talking about. It's putting people in an authentic movie, and again that happens with that story. Yeah, so powerful.
So I'm curious about, because I do a lot of ghostwriting for our coaches and Jamie sometimes, and so I kind of see a lot of similarities between ghostwriting songs and ghostwriting articles and books and things.
Yeah.
So tell me a little bit about like your process as. I'm just curious, purely from a personal perspective, like your process when you're working on a song for somebody else and you're incorporating your story and their story and still having their authentic voice in it also.
Yeah, I just, for me, I think for anybody, you just have to find a way to make it your story. Mm-hmm. David Lee Murphy and myself wrote a song called Everything Gonna Be All Right, that Kenny Chesney and he had a huge hit with. And that was just, I imagined, really it's just, I say retrieve it till you believe it, right? So I'm using my memory bank. I still it till I feel it. I'm just imagining myself. I've sat at a bar before or at the beach, and whether I was having a drink or having a burger or whatever. I've been there. I felt like crap before and felt like the weight of the world was on my back, and I've not felt great. I've had people give me good pieces of advice, which is what the song's about. And then I have felt better because of that good advice. So I put myself in that song and I just wrote it from my perspective, not really writing what I think that Kenny Chesney wants to say, because I'll never know Kenny Chesney. Met him, hung out with him, but he's Kenny. I don't know. I don't know anybody, but I know me. And I know that the unwavering principle of if I'm feeling it, my chances are exponentially higher that you're going to feel it as well. So I just make those stories my stories, and that's my template. If I get to a place to where I'm not feeling it, or I can't connect with it, tie it to my story somehow, I feel like I know I'm doing it wrong. Mm-hmm. And sometimes I rely on a co-writer in the room. If they're getting emotional over an emotional song like an I Drive Your Truck, like Connie Harrington, who I co-wrote that with, every line that we came up with, if she didn't start crying, because she cries more than any human alive, if she didn't start crying, then we knew we were doing something wrong. So we would kind of use that, because she was definitely feeling it and seeing her own life, because she had experienced something similar to that. So it's just the story.
See, that means all my calls with you are good, because half the time you cry on them, right?
Jeez,
So,
Jamie. Call me out on the framework. I cry a lot, so I should meet Connie. We should talk.
Oh my gosh. Well, when we won the CMA award, we would go around to all these different networks, and when you do that and you're up for that, they put you down the red carpet, and you're all these organizations, Newsweek, CBS, and all, whoever, and we're going down, and every single time they would want to do an interview, and we'd go to the next station, they'd do an interview, and they would ask us, so tell us, how'd you ride, how'd you drive your truck? And because she cries at the drop, I would always go, well, Connie, tell them how we rode our truck. And she would she would punch me in the arm, and she would start talking, and she would cry. So
we learned from Abby Wambach, the soccer player, last year, that it's physically impossible to cry and drink water at the same time. And I don't know if that works though, because I do. When you see me drinking a bunch of water, I'm about to cry.
Oh wow! Okay.
When I heard your song today on stage, I was like, oh come on, I don't have any water.
Yeah. Well, and the way she learned it, though, right? Like, that's a really interesting story, too, because you told me that, but less tied to a story.
I did tell him.
Yeah, you told me that on a show. And when she got arrested, for her DUI, they gave her water because she was crying so much at the station that she couldn't do the photo. And so they gave her water because they'll do that so people stop crying, so they can just get the mugshot done. And she was thought, how bad of a part of her life that was. And she might have not even told all that on stage. Maybe some of it. I don't remember exactly, but
she didn't. But she did hold it on the podcast.
Yeah.
Oh wow.
So she's awesome. But so you've written songs for a ton of people. You mentioned Kenny, who you go by first name with now, right?
K.
Yeah, K. K. That's good. Do you have a favorite person you've worked with, or a favorite song that you've been able to create over the years?
Yeah, I usually have to say that Tim McGraw is. I find him to be an incredibly authentic guy. He's just so down to earth, and he's I didn't for 28 years in Nashville, couldn't get arrested by him. No recordings by him. Told a story about losing a good buddy of mine and calling my mom, parking down by the lake, and I called Mama. He recorded it last year. It was a hit for him, and then he reached out to me, and I've had a few recordings since then. And he just did the Bluebird about 6 months ago with me, and got up and did some songs, and we hung out, and he went and took me out to the car, and we played songs, but I'm not, because he's just such a real guy, and it's neat to be reminded that when you meet these people, you can't. I find that I don't know of one successful music artist that I have met, that I have connections with, that has disappointed me. You don't get to that level by being rude and being ungrateful and insincere, and you just gratitude and being down to earth and vulnerable and real. It just creates those relationships that enables you to utilize talent and authenticity and vulnerability to get you to the top. So I find that the Blake Sheltons, the Kenny Chesneys, the Tim McGraws, the George Straits, the Rascal Flatts, these guys are they're so daggone down to earth, and you hang out with them, and they're really kind of insecure. You get them off that stage and out of the limelight, and they're just regular old guys that gives them an outlet to kind of showcase that confidence. But you talk about the imposter syndrome. I don't know any of them that doesn't experience that on some level. It just and it helps to know that when you talk to them and they're insecure. Tim McGraw's insecure when he said, "Am I singing this right the way you sung it? Am I doing it right?" I'm like, "What are you talking about? Stop!" And I know Terry Bradshaw well. I've gotten to know him well. I've spent a week with him in Hawaii playing golf with him, and just him and I for a whole week one time, and I remember being intimidated by him because he's Terry Bradshaw, and then I remember him getting ready to hit a golf ball at one point, and he stops. And I'm like, what are you doing? And he says, oh, I don't want to. And there was a cart coming up with some people on it. He said, I'm going to wait till they go by because I don't want to hit a stray ball and look like an idiot. I'm like, oh my God, you're human. Okay, cool. But it was like, it's just like these people are so down to earth, and they question stuff, and they whatever, and they want to do good. They don't want to disappoint. And they're just regular old people. But it makes sense that to be successful, you can't do that unless you are building relationships. And people like people that are real and authentic. They don't like superheroes. Yeah. So it's really interesting to me that these successful people like Tim and whoever, they all are just real people. And the ones that don't seem the cream that doesn't rise to the top, the ones that don't tend to be ones that are caught up in themselves and are trying to be really cool all the time. People don't relate to that, just like Superman. They had to make him, they had to give him the kryptonite, they had to give him that authenticity. So yeah, but Tim, and he's just a drop dead good looking guy. He's cool as he can be. He's so good looking and cool that you're around him and you can't hardly look him in the eyes. He just, he's such a cool guy. He's so cool. He's just a cool guy.
Yeah, well, I imagine golf humbles a lot of people that are really good at other things too.
Oh, gosh, tell me about it. Yes.
Yeah. It's like, you might be really good at writing songs, but every once in a while that golf ball is going to tell you, you're okay here.
A golf ball's a good place to connect with people, and it's funny you'd say that. But because of that, because people hit some horrible shots, and it's hard to be cool when you've just hit a ball a mile in the woods.
Yeah.
So,
except for Tim, because he still looks so good that you're like, I don't even know.
That was a great shot.
It wasn't Tim's fault. It's got to be the wind. Yeah. It's got to be the wind. Yes.
Nothing's Tim's fault.
No, it wasn't his fault.
Nothing bad could be.
No, but he's a great guy. He's just such a good guy.
Yeah. So have you met Faith Hill then?
I have met Faith Hill. I don't know her like I know Tim, but I have. It's funny. Tim has texted me before and said Faith really likes this song. Aww. Like when I called Mama, he said that Faith just couldn't stop listening to it, which I know it's a great sign when your wife loves a song. And so I was like, oh, that's great. You never want Faith, him to go, Faith hates this. It's not going to happen.
She really regrets that I recorded this one.
Right, exactly. So
Faith approved.
Yeah, but she's so down to earth too. It's just really, they're a great couple. Yeah.
Well, I want to be respectful of your time. I've loved having you out here. And, our audience that was here at Excel loved it. You got everybody involved and made them feel. And I think that's, super important. And I know that we'll have lots of people talking to me and others about it here. So we love that. One of the questions we love to ask at the end of the show, which is, kind of a little bit of our motto and tagline here at Carson, is, what does freedom mean to you? And it's the same thing, right? Everybody tells it a little bit different.
Yeah.
What does it mean to you?
Freedom to me is, I care less about people's opinion of me today than I did yesterday. Mm-hmm. And you hear so many times, it's freeing not to worry about what people think about you, people's opinions of you. But I don't go around thinking, well, don't worry about what people think about you. Don't worry about what people think about you. Just be yourself. Just be yourself. But really, if I can just live in a state of just continue to tell my story, be myself, be authentic, be who I am, and just enjoy that, and that's a fun way to live. Yeah. Then you really do get to a place to where it's like, you're okay if some people just not going to like you because you sound, look, or act like somebody they didn't like, maybe you look like some dude that picked on them in high school. Who knows? Yeah. But it's just living in a state. I tell you, it's freeing to know that your messed up story can actually be the thing that causes people to like you that wouldn't otherwise like you. Yeah. And knowing that kind of gives you the upper hand and helps you understand that if somebody don't like you, it's probably because they're dealing with their own stuff, and we all dealing with something. So for me, it really is. It's freeing today to feel with experience and age and whatever. Yeah. I don't worry too much what people think about me. That feels good.
That is pretty good.
Yeah.
I'm gonna do one request, and you can say no. I've never had anyone play any music as like the outro music.
Oh,
so the podcast has like closing music. But do you feel up for it? Last year we had somebody write a poem on the show.
Yeah.
Here, do you feel up for it?
Writing a poem?
No, not writing a poem. We can do that too.
Know your audience.
I can sing
know your audience. You want to write poems with me, Jimmy? Like, I really like writing
I would love that.
my kids.
Well, I'll call you and we'll book something.
Because my son really likes poems.
Really?
He likes the rhythmic aspect of them.
Absolutely.
So,
well, I started out writing poems. Yeah.
See, I knew you wrote poems.
Really?
Yeah.
Well, I mean, songs
are poems.
Well, let's. I can do like a chorus and a verse and a chorus, and everything's gonna be all right.
Yeah.
Just to make everybody feel
Love
good.
it.
We want to feel
That's
good,
a
right?
great way to close out Framework.
She rattled the ice in my plastic cup. I said, yes, man, fill her up. Tell me something good that I don't know. This world been kicking my behind. Life ain't been a friend of mine. And lately I've been feeling kinda low. She looked back over her shoulder, pointed at the sign hanging up on the wall, and it said, everything's gonna be alright. Everything gonna be alright. Well, nobody's gotta worry about nothing. Don't go hitting that panic button. It ain't near as bad as you think. Everything gonna be alright. 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 Everything gonna be alright. 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 Oh, that feels good.
Whoa, that was awesome.
Damn it, Jimmy, you did it.
Thank y'all so much for having me. I had a blast.
No,
Thank you.
Thank you, Jimmy. That was beautiful. Thank you so much for being here. Anna, thanks for joining me again here. That was perfect. And everybody else, thanks for joining us this week on the Framework Podcast.
Thank y'all.